All right, let's spin this wheel one more time for the episode where we talk about another topic in this year's Year in Review. You ready, Zero?
Yeah, let's go for the second topic for this week.
Spin that wheel! Yeah! Wheel of Morality. Turn, turn, turn. Tell us the lesson that we should learn. Oh, God. Interesting. We just talked about this. Lootbox regulations. Something interesting happened essentially this year, and that's basically that a bunch of countries and some boards have essentially told the gaming industry it's time to control the loot box situation, or we're going to do something about it. The recent news was that Australia put in a bill. A politician put in a bill to regulate loot boxes. Didn't the Netherlands as well at some point this year? The UK. Go ahead.
The Netherlands had regulation a while ago, but it wasn't until I want to say last year, Belgium decided to join in and say, yeah, we're going to follow the Netherlands lead, and we're going to also start banning loot boxes because I think it was sometime late last year, NBA 2K22 had like a little message in the beginning for people who were playing the game in either the Netherlands or in Belgium that basically amounted to, hey, do you guys not like the ability to buy My Team packs? You should beg to your government that what they're doing is unjust. So please lobby your government to re-enable loot boxes, essentially.
Yeah. And from what I've heard, that didn't really work out very well. Belgium is another one that's banned loot boxes. I think they did that last year.
Which is what I just mentioned. So
I thought you mentioned the Netherlands.
No, I said the Netherlands started it, but then Belgium followed.
I'm sorry. I'm doing two things at once. Okay.
And then, of course, as you mentioned, we had an Australian politician get on board saying, hey, we should really start looking at regulating this and also rating games that have loot boxes to be rated for adults only.
Yep.
And in extreme cases, maybe even rating the games as RC, which in the Australian rating system, an RC is essentially a refused classification, effectively banning the game from sale in the Australian market. So very, very, very serious sorts of discussions on this. And I believe some U.S. politicians have also started to make some mumblings about potentially evaluating loot boxes on a legislative basis too. So there could be some things in the works for the U.S. market too.
Right. I know that Ted Cruz talked about it a little bit. I know Marco Rubio has. A bunch of Democratic politicians have talked about it. The Republicans are kind of in the thought process of there's nothing really a government should do on this, whereas the Democrats are slightly different, but not as concrete. But yeah, there are those in the U.S. The UK, their commission on gambling has leveled warnings to the gaming industry to start regulating yourselves, or we will. We have a bunch of countries in the EU that have also talked about doing regulations on loot boxes. This is something that, for the most part, has been a lot of talk in the past couple of years. But this is the first year where I think governments are getting serious about it, where they are now leveling threats, or they're starting to put laws into to possibly put laws down in order to get this started and to get the conversation of possibly banning these loot boxes, which is interesting that it took them this long to do this. I guess the question is there big enough teeth to either make the gaming industry stop and regulate them more efficiently, or will they have enough power in the legislature or in other countries with politicians to put a roadblock down and to not make this happen? What are your thoughts?
As far as potential for adding roadblocks to loot boxes, I think it's very likely that it's going to happen, and I think we're already seeing the foundations of that. A great example of this would be Overwatch 2. Launch of Overwatch 2 has definitely shown this, especially since I want to say either weeks or months before the official launch date back in October, Blizzard had made a giant blog post saying, hey, so Overwatch 2 will be doing away with loot boxes, and instead we will have the ability to buy things outright from the store, and additionally we'll have a season pass so you can get some of these cool collectible things that you can add to your profile and whatnots. And I think that's really where the likely next step of the gaming industry is going to be. It's going to be just trying to monetize the hell out of the season passes and trying to do whatever it takes to make sure that gamers maximize their engagement time by doing stuff related to season passes. So things like, hey, there's this really cool costume you can get for this one character, but the only way to get it is to buy in on the season pass. Oh, by the way, the season pass is live today, and you have 2 or 3 months in order to work on the season pass and get the items. And if you don't get the item, well, sucks to be you. Tough luck. You better hope it comes back around next time, or that we feel generous enough to offer it up in the cash shop so you can just buy it outright.
I wonder how well that's going to turn out, though. And we'll get into this if we ever get into talking about Overwatch 2, which is on the wheel. Overwatch 2 had the distinct issue of a lot of people complaining about the prices regarding these skins. I think there's one skin in there that's like $20 to just get. I wonder if they are really going to have to force themselves to stay away from loot boxes. First off, it's going to hurt the sports games like the most out of anything, because the sports games still do loot boxes, and 2, they have ingrained those games into loot boxes like so much that they would have to essentially redo the entire process of the game, not in the gameplay but in the menus, in order to divorce themselves from it. And here's the thing, I don't think that putting in a shop like that would work for the sports games. I think a lot of people who are into sports games are so ingrained into having sports cards, like baseball cards, football cards, basketball cards, stuff like that, that it was just a natural extension of doing that. So they were completely okay with it. Whereas now if you take that away, you're going to get a lot less people who are going to be willing to interface with that type of business model. For example, I don't see somebody paying $20 for a Shaquille O'Neal card. I don't see that. I see people looking at that and go, for a character, are you fucking insane? I'm not spending $20 on Shaquille O'Neal. That's crazy. And then you're going to have the stigma of the only way you got that card is that you actually paid $20 to it. And there's that extra stigma and shame to it when you purchase that. So here is what I think is going to end up happening. Once these loot boxes either regulated away, or the business or these companies take them out on their own volition, you're going to see a sharp layoff of a lot of these studios, from EA, 2K, and the likes, that have been using these to bump up their sales projections.
I think it's likely possible. I could see something like a reduction of staff psychologists, because a lot of these loot box systems, they're typically developed with a psychologist on staff who knows how to tell the art designers to do the right things to get the endorphin rush going of opening the loot boxes. I can see a lot of those positions going away, but they'll maybe keep just a handful of these staff psychologists to work on the battle passes to make sure that the battle passes are just engaging enough to keep the players playing the game and constantly interacting with the game to make sure that the players don't leave the treadmill.
What do you think they can do that, though?
They can probably do some effects on like the season pass rewards. So like if you have the standard season pass, then you just get kind of like just a little bit of fireworks. So you're just kind of like, oh, okay, neat. But they might kind of tease you and go, hey, you sure you don't want to consider going premium on the season pass? Look at how epic the rewards could have been, and just a preview of the rewards could be tied to like just a massive fireworks display or something, and to show all the potential rewards you're missing out on, just to kind of drive that sort of FOMO reaction in you, that you just go, okay, well, shit, if the rewards are that cool and that's the reaction that the game would give me if I did get the season pass, okay, I guess I'll throw it on an extra $30 for the season 5 season pass or something.
Now, I know that NBA has season passes. They have I think they're called journeys or seasons or something, where basically they not only have like a kind of a season pass, but you level it up to get different cards or different types of things. But they also release every season a new set of cards that you have to collect. They do. I know they do that. MLB, the game I play all the time, has season passes, I think about every 3 weeks, that you can grind to get different types of cards, but they are fairly reasonable. So I don't know if the EA games have it. I don't think they do. But I can see them definitely going that route too, of doing more battle passes and stuff like that. So that will be interesting. Do you think that sports games start going away from the loot box model next year? Or do you think they're going to have to be forced kicking and screaming to actually get out of it?
This one is hard to say, mostly because I feel it's going to really depend on how the governmental bodies end up sort of evaluating the situation. Because if it's one of those situations that they really hardball the game developers and basically say, hey, you need to knock off this business quick or else, then yeah, at that point, in that sort of scenario, they might have to be dragged kicking and screaming immediately sometime next year. But, let's say they grease the right palms over at the ESA, and then the ESA greases the right palms in the U.S. government, then yeah, they might not go away next year. They may not go away until maybe sometime after 2025, when they finally get laws codified and say, hey, on this day we're signing off a bill to say that this sort of thing cannot be in video games anymore, and if you don't like it, tough nuts. But yeah, I think that's really what's going to come down to, just how legislators around the world end up treating loot boxes. Because yeah, if it's something like the EU as a collective ends up standing up together and saying, yeah, we just want to ban loot boxes altogether, then that might be another scenario that could bring video game developers kicking and screaming, because they're going to see that as, shit, our game is getting banned in the entirety of the EU. We cannot do without that sweet, sweet cash from Europe, so give them what they want. We'll make a loot box free game, and we'll just make it the default version of the game available everywhere.
Here's what I think. The FTC is aggressively going after tech companies. They just went after Epic. They're going after Microsoft. I don't see how they can grease any palms to the government when the FTC is going after these tech companies this aggressively. So I don't think that's going to happen with America. I think that if they find another thing to go against the tech companies with, they're going to go after them. And it would be, in my opinion, it would be in the best interests of these businesses, 2K, EA, is to either stop it now and then implement that shop and game pass and that battle pass model in the following year, or slowly start to take that stuff away. Like if you've already coded Like, I don't see, for example, MLB, the new MLB is due out in like 4 months, okay? I can't see them taking away the packs and the loot boxes. So I can see them still having them, but maybe making them cheaper, or making the odds a lot more generous, or just making it so they're not as necessary to have them at all, to a certain extent. And then the following year saying, okay, we're getting rid of the packs. I think, in all honesty, with these many countries and these big of countries starting to fight against it, I think these companies are going to start getting legal advices from their lawyers, basically saying it's time to start curbing this down. And I think when that starts happening, the sign of that starting to happen is when the CEOs of these companies, like Andrew Wilson, Strauss Zelnick, and the like, start stepping down. Because when they start stepping down is when they're going to realize, oh, I'm going to take a bath in the next quarter because we're not going to have these loot boxes. So I might as well ride out into the sunset and let somebody else deal with that. If they start stepping down, like, suddenly, or they're saying, oh, I'm leaving after X quarter of this year, then you know that the money is going to start drying up. So I think that is what's going to happen. They're going to want to still play nice with the regulators, because if they start to being defiant and say, we're going to do it until you make us, then there's other things that these regulators can actually pin them on right after they do it. They'll want to play ball to a certain extent by basically making the need for the FTC and these regulators to not concentrate on them as much. Because let's be honest here. If they start saying, we're going to put laws down, or we're going to start having guidances and stuff, what usually slows that down are the businesses saying, maybe we should hold off on that. And then the regulators will start saying, okay, well, they're stopping doing that, so we don't have to concentrate on that right now. We'll concentrate on something else, and we'll get to that when that time comes. So then the press stuff is, I don't know, is not as bad. And then loot boxes get regulated away in, let's say, 2025, when no one's been using loot boxes for a couple of years. I think that's what's bound to happen. Do you have any more thoughts on the subject?
Yeah, it'll just be interesting to see how this all pans out. Honestly, the season pass thought, I would like to see more game developers do what Halo Infinite is doing, which is when you buy the season pass, it is yours to keep forever.
Yes.
And you can even go back and toggle on an old season pass in case if you just want to complete it because it had a certain cosmetic set that you want. I would like to see more developers do that, but unfortunately, I know most won't, because they just want to prey on the FOMO and just get people into spending just as much cash as they can on a game. And it's a bit disappointing, because I know, as a gamer who's getting up in my years and everything, I just don't simply have the interest to just mono game one game just to grind out season pass stuff. It's just not that fun for me anymore.
I definitely understand that, and I think that will then become the next thing that regulators will prey on, because I don't think a lot of these regulators realize that people are paying for stuff that are then taken away from them. And when that happens, I think that's going to get a lot of the regulators starting wondering, so wait a minute, you're having people spend $100, $200, $300 on stuff, and they're not even getting the stuff they want? I mean, that's pretty anti-consumer, and to an extent, I think in some countries that's actually against the law to then, unless it's like a lottery system of some sorts, you really shouldn't be able to do that. I agree with you. Like, Gwent, the game I keep telling you ad nauseum about, does that, where if you buy the pass, you have access to it for as long as you're playing the game, which is great to me. I mean, I would rather that. So I don't see why any of these companies wouldn't do that at this point. They'll make up some like technical excuse. Like, well, we don't have the space or the RAM to actually do that, which is bullshit. They can easily find that. But I think that will be after the loot box thing is done, that'll be the next thing that they will probably prey upon when it comes to regulation. And we'll see what comes from that. Thank you for listening to this podcast segment. The Capital Games podcast is done every week, and we post it on all your favorite podcast apps, as well as segments on YouTube. If you want to listen to another segment, you can listen to a new one right there on the screen. We also do a movie podcast called the Capital Games Movie Club. If you'd like, you can go ahead and click on that and see all the movies that we have reviewed from that point. Thank you for listening, and we hope to hear from you soon.